بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. So let's continue with the seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We were talking about the Battle of Khaybar, which was a big event. The reasons, just a quick recap of what we said before. The reasons for this battle, some of them, the Jews, that was their last stronghold. They plotted against the Prophet ﷺ multiple times. They were involved directly or indirectly with many conspiracies against the Muslims. They tried to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ even. So there were many reasons. And the Prophet ﷺ found the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah, to be a good time, since he is not worried about Quraysh attacking Medina when he took his army. And we said because Khaybar is a very rich place, full of treasures. The Jews, all their treasures were there. And they used to bury their treasures because there was, of course, no banks and stuff. So they used to bury their treasures and hide it. So all of the wealthy Jews were there. And the soil was very fertile. Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can you close the door, please, Brother Shahid? I like your shirt, mashallah. It's shiny. Mashallah. So, we said that Khaybar had multiple fortresses around it. And the Jews, every time they feel that they are losing, they will go inside one more fortress. And there were 9 fortresses, and those were the major ones, wa alaykum assalam, and there were smaller ones as well. So after losing 4 fortresses, now they are at the 5th one, which is called an-Nizar, the fortress of an-Nizar. This one was the most, if you want to say, fortified, powerful fortress they had. And the proof to that is that the Jews made their children and women stay there. So the first four fortresses, there was no women or children because the Jews were preparing themselves for defeat. So in case we get defeated, they don't capture our wives and children. So that's why they told their wives and children to evacuate all the way to the 5th fortress, which is the one we're talking about now. Now, of course, that was a double-edged sword because if they lose, they can't run away anymore. They were able to run away throughout the first 4 fortresses, but now this time, even though there are still fortresses inside, but if they lose, if they run away, they will leave behind their children and their families and most of their treasures as well. So the battle started, the Muslims placed siege on the fortress, and it took a while, it was not easy, until the Prophet ﷺ ordered the Muslims, and that was the first time, to manufacture, if you want to call it, or to build some catapults. It does not say here, where did the Prophet ﷺ get the idea of catapults, because this is the first time they use it. Was it something that was used before and the Prophet ﷺ got the idea from that, or how did he get the idea? But it was the first time the Muslims used catapults to break some of the walls of that fortress, and that helped a lot. The fight was moved from outside into inside, and the Muslims won. The Jews still ran away, and they left their women and children. So they still ran away and they left their women and children. So up to this point, half of Khaybar was under the Muslim control. 50% of that city was under the Muslim control. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wanted to continue until they get the whole area. And there were only 3 more fortresses left. Some opinion says there was no real fight after that. They went into negotiations. And some say there was one more battle between the Muslims and the Jews.
And that seems to be the case. One more battle, the Muslims were victorious, and that's when the Jews decided to negotiate. Now, here, this is an important point to mention. If you look at this from any different perspective other than the Islamic one, like you are winning, you have no reason to negotiate. Why would you negotiate? When two sides are fighting and nobody's winning, then they get into some negotiations to see how they can end the war. But one side is overwhelmingly winning and the other side is being defeated. Why will the winning side accept negotiations? They're winning. And still, and that shows you how Islam was not saying to conquer land or to take people's treasures. That was not the reason for any of the Muslims' conquests. It was merely to spread the word of Allah or to protect Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Jews here at this point offered the Muslim, their leader, his name was Ibn Abi al-Haqiq. That was the leader that is left. Most of their other leaders were killed in the previous battles. That was the one that was left. He sent a letter to the Prophet ﷺ, can we negotiate? Can we talk about this? And like I said, any other commander from any other civilization, any other nation will never agree to that at this point. You are victorious. You have no reason to negotiate. Because again, negotiation means you're going to reach a solution and most likely you're going to have to compromise. But why would you want to compromise if you are winning? And again, you are winning big time. So after trying all these fortresses and failing, now the Jews want to negotiate. And the Prophet ﷺ still agreed to that. So they started the negotiations. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ allowed them to leave peacefully. You can leave the place. We're not going to hurt you. You take your women and children with you. And you cannot take your treasures with you, though. You have to leave the treasures behind. And you cannot hide these treasures. You have to tell us where those treasures they were buried. So the Jews agreed to that. And they were starting to evacuate the area. And by that, the Muslims got control over the whole city, Khaybar. But then something happened, and this is very important. When we read any book or we try to learn on our own without a teacher, we could be in trouble because of a story I actually found in this book. And I didn't feel comfortable with the story, so I did my own research. And then I found out that the story is incorrect. It's wrong. It never happened. So this is a big deal. And that's why we always say studying anything without a teacher can be dangerous. So what happened was one of the Jewish wealthy, rich people, his name was Kinan ibn Rabi'a. He had the treasure of Bani Nadir, basically a big treasure, and he was the only one who knew where this treasure was buried. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, where is the treasure? He said, I do not know. A Jewish man, subhanAllah, sometimes they tell on each other for some reason. A Jewish man told on him, he said, I saw this guy, Kinana, going to that land back and forth. When the battle was happening, he did not join the battle, but instead he was going to that land back and forth, and it looked suspicious to me. So the Prophet ﷺ said, is that where you hid the treasure? Kinana said no. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, and if we find it, does that mean you let me punish you in any punishment I want? Which means death. If you're lying to me and we find the treasure there, your punishment will be death. He agreed. The man agreed to that. So they went and they started digging, and then they found some of the treasure. Still, and again, this is the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, because they agreed. There is an agreement here that this guy will be punished by death. But The Prophet gave him another chance. He said, tell me where is the rest of the treasure. This is not the whole thing. Tell me where the rest of the treasure is. So he refused. Now, up to this point, the story is okay. What comes next is what made me kind of like concerned. The story here says in the book that the Prophet ﷺ ordered Zubayr ibn al-Awwam to torture this man until he tells them where the treasure is hidden. Now, knowing the personality and the character of the Prophet ﷺ, he will never torture anyone for treasure or no treasure. He will not do that. That's not something the Prophet ﷺ will do. And in Islam, we said this before, there is no torture. In any possible given situation, torture just to inflict pain on people for no reason, the lashes and the stoning, those are not tortures. These are punishments because of hududullah, the boundaries of Allah. This is not torture. This is a punishment for making a sin or making a mistake. But torture because he's not telling us where the treasure is, that seemed a little suspicious to me. So I looked into the story and I found out that the story is actually not true. It does not have any sanad. It has no proof, no authenticity to it whatsoever. And again, that's why we always say don't read a book, even though this book, Rahiq al-Makhtoum, is known and it won the first prize of the best seerah book a few years ago. So it does have some mistakes in it, because here he doesn't say the story is weak even. He just mentions it, that Zubayr started torturing him and then in the end they killed him. So this whole story was not true. That never happened. Ṣafīyyah, radiyallahu anha, she was engaged, and we talked about the story of Ṣafīyyah before. Before even the Battle of Khaybar started, Ṣafīyyah had a dream that the moon fell and landed on her lap. When she told her father, Huyay ibn Akhtab was one of the arch enemies of Islam. He slapped her and he told her the meaning of your dream. He knew that you're going to marry the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the moon. And the Jews knew without a doubt that he's the last prophet. And he said, I'm not going to let that happen. And he forced her to marry one of the Jewish person who was wealthy but old. And some say it's the same guy, Kinana, the guy who hid the treasure. Allahu A'lam, who was supposed to be her husband. But he was killed. Her husband and her father, both of them were killed in the Battle of Khaybar. And then the Prophet ﷺ ends up marrying her. So Ṣafīyyah bint Huyay ibn Akhtab is from the wives, one of the wives of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we mentioned a funny story before. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. I don't remember. Because she's from a Jewish culture. She's different from the Arabs. She asked the other wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Prophet comes close to me, to do the husband-wife thing, what should I say? I want him to be comfortable and to be happy. So they wanted to mess with her, just play with her a little bit. They told her, say A'udhu Billah. Or Ma'ad Allah. Ma'ad Allah. Ma'ad Allah is even worse than A'udhu Billah. So she said, okay, she didn't know what that meant. So when the Prophet ﷺ came close to her, she said, Ma'ad Allah, and the Prophet ﷺ said, you're seeking refuge by the most powerful. He got up and he left without doing anything. So she asked next day what happened. Yes, of course. In what circumstances did the Prophet marry Ṣafīyyah? What do you mean, what circumstances? They got married like normal. I don't understand.
Oh, I mean, how did he know about her?
So if
How did they met?
yeah, the Ṣafīyyah, since we said the Jews ran away and they left their women and children, she was captured, just like the rest of the women. And the Prophet ﷺ heard about her. And this is again from the mercy and the greatness of our beloved Prophet. Ṣafīyyah is from a noble family. And for her to be captured and to be treated like a prisoner will be difficult for her. She's not, that kind of person. So the Prophet, when he heard about her, that because Huyay ibn Akhtab is the leader of Banu Nadir. So her father was a leader, and she's from a royal family, basically. So the Prophet ﷺ did not want her to feel bad. And the only way to save her from this captivity is by marrying her, because that will make the companions deal with her as Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, one of the mothers of the believers. So that gave her a lot of honor and made her feel better about that situation she was in. That's how it happened, inshallah.
Did she become a Muslim or she stayed?
No, of course she became a Muslim immediately. Because of her dream, she was prepared already because of the dream, and she knew the meaning of the dream. She's going to get married to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Jews, they all knew about the Prophet. So now her father is not there to stop her. Why not? Yeah, she became Muslim. Now, the next part will be about the spoils of war. We said this area is very rich. So how did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam divide the spoils of war? First, the agreement we talked about was that the Jews will leave, as we said. You take your children and your families and leave. But then they came to the Prophet ﷺ, the Jews, and they said, we are the people who lived here for so long. We know this. We are the locals. We know this area. And we are farmers. So let us stay here and work in this land. It will be better than, you know, your people coming here and they don't know much about this, and they will be basically wasting it. And we will give you half of the harvest every year. The harvest of Khaybar, which was a lot, will give you half of it every year. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam agreed, and he appointed Abdullah ibn Rawaha to be the one who collects that half every year. And the reason why this name is, of course, Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiallahu anhu is a great companion, but they're going to try to bribe him later, by the way. One of the years when he goes to collect they tell him, how about we give you some money and you go back and tell them there was no harvest this year. So we'll talk about that. This bribing thing is not a new thing. This happens today, and it happened in the past. And there was a lot of riches, a lot of treasures. Khaybar was a big, and that's why the companions used to say, we never got full after any meal, except after Khaybar was conquered. And that shows you the big difference. Their lives completely changed. And the Muhajirin, those who came from Mecca to Medina, and they needed help from the Ansar, the people of the locals of Medina, they gave them back everything they took from them after the Battle of Khaybar, because again, everybody became rich.
Yeah, can I put a question in the chat?
The question in the chat. Where is the chat?
So, I mean, shouldn't the treatment of rich and poor be the same? So, like, why did he marry Ṣafīyyah if she was rich?
No, it's not about rich. I didn't say she was rich. I said she was noble.
Noble.
So it was not about being rich or poor. No, that is not. The spoils of war were divided according to the rules of Islam. But he got married to her because she's noble. She's not used to a life of captivity. She cannot survive, basically, in a harsh situation, like, you know, prisoners. So he did that to save her nobility. But it was not about money. He did not take any money from her.
Right.
Yeah, it's because of status, not money.
Sheikh, there were three Jewish tribes in Medina. One was killed. So in Khaybar, these are the two remaining tribes, correct?
Yes. Well, maybe 1.5, because one was killed. One was made to leave Medina, and some of them went to Asham, and some of them went to Khaybar. Those are the ones who they did uncovered that Muslim lady who started the problem. We talked about it before. Yeah. So, but the remains of the Jews of Medina, all of them went there.
Okay, thanks.
And some of them went to Asham. Yes, you are welcome, inshallah. Okay. So the Battle of Khaybar was finished. The Muslims were going back to Medina. Everybody is happy. It was a big victory. And one of the big threats for the Muslims was eliminated. During that time, Ja'far radiallahu anh, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, comes back from Abyssinia. And that made the happiness double. Even to the point the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I don't know what makes me happier, the conquest of Khaybar or the return of Ja'far. And by the way, the word Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh, he is the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is the older brother of Ali, is being used in some kind of bad ways. If you watched Aladdin, Jafar is the bad guy, right? Many movies I have watched, they use the word Jafar for bad people. And I don't think that was done by coincidence. I don't think so. So, Allahu A'lam. So, the Prophet ﷺ used to say to Ja'far, you look like me and you behave like me. And this is a great honor to tell someone your manners, you have the same manners as I. That's a great honor to be given to anyone. By the way, when Ja'far went to Al-Habasha many years before, in the Hijrah, before Medina, Hijrah, the immigration to Al-Habasha, Abyssinia, there were 70 people. They came back from Habasha, thousands. So they were not just sitting there taking refuge, asylum, and just doing nothing. They were inviting people to Islam, and they came back from there to Medina, thousands. They say 2 big ships full of people. So that they did a lot of work in Al-Habasha. And more people accepted Islam after that. Now, the next part is talking about how the Prophet ﷺ got married to Ṣafīyyah. I already said the story because it was a question. So the Ṣafīyyah, now it is important to know that their law at that time, which might sound weird at our time, but the women and the children who get captured after battle, they become slaves normally. That was the urf, the what is known, done all the time. So that's why Ṣafīyyah was going to become a slave, and the Prophet ﷺ saved her from that by marrying her. And that is, again, to answer the question, it was not for her money or anything like that. And the Prophet ﷺ, before marrying her, he offered her Islam, and she accepted Islam immediately. And they did have, by the way, a wedding and everything. And he had the walima. Even though they were traveling, they were not back yet from Khaybar yet. On the way, the Prophet ﷺ had a walima, and they had a wedding and everything. Because some people think, weddings are haram and we're not supposed to be happy. Of course not. The Prophet ﷺ almost had a wedding for all of his marriages, and walima for almost all of his marriages. But don't overdo it with the expenditure, with the cost. That's when it becomes bad, when people overspend. Other than that, it's sunnah to have a walima. Okay. By the way, subhanallah, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ noticed. Yes.
What is walima?
What is walima? Oh my goodness. Brother Mujib, you have to say after me, Ashhadu. You don't know what walima is? Walima is when a man gets married, he makes food and he invites people. It's called walima. When the Prophet ﷺ got married to Ṣafīyyah, he saw a kind of like on the side of her face, not a scar, kind of like, what do you call it? Subhanallah, the word escaped me. No. When somebody slaps you or hits you really hard, it leaves a mark. What do you call that? Huh? No. When it gets pale, like it becomes a little pale, because if it was really hard slap, There was a word for it. Oh my goodness, I forgot. Bruise. Yeah, bruised. That's the word I was looking for. Bruised.
Becomes blue, not white.
Yeah, bruised.
Okay.
No, so when the Prophet ﷺ get married to Ṣafīyyah, he saw a bruise on the side of her face. So he asked her what happened. She told him that I had a dream before we got married. We just told you about the dream. I just told you about the dream that the moon came and fell onto my lap. And when I said that to my father, he knew the meaning of the dream and he slapped me so hard. So can you imagine a father slapping his daughter like that to a point that it left a bruise on the side of her face? Now, after Khaybar was done, we said the Prophet ﷺ agreed that the Jews are going to stay there and they are going to cultivate and work in the land, and 50% of the harvest will be given to the Muslims every year. There was a lady from the Jews. She was upset because of the outcome of Khaybar. Her name was Zainab bint al-Harith. She invited the Prophet ﷺ to a shah. Shah is like a goat. And she asked, what is the part of the goat the Prophet ﷺ prefers or loves the most? And he used to love the shoulder. So she put poison. She poisoned the shoulder and she cooked the goat and she brought it to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, by the way, was with his companions, and the Prophet will always share. And of course, the poison was not only in the shoulder, the poison was all over. The Prophet ﷺ took one bite and he felt it, subhanAllah, he felt the poison because she put too much poison in the shoulder. When she asked which part he likes, so she did more than the rest of so the Prophet ﷺ felt it in his mouth and he spit it out. But some of the companions who ate, they ate, basically, they just ate and they died because of that poison. The Prophet ﷺ called her and he asked her, did you poison this goat? She said yes. So she admitted. The Prophet ﷺ said, why did you do that? She said, I wanted to know if you are truly a prophet, you will not die. And if you're really just making yourself, you're claiming, then you will die and we'll get rid of you. This is terrible logic. You can't do that. I'm going to test if you're a prophet or not by giving you some poison. That doesn't work this way. Now, some say she was killed because the companions died because of her. Some say the Prophet ﷺ forgave her. So we don't have 100% opinion. As far as I know, she was killed, but Allahu Alam regarding that.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم واعف عنا إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين